Vaginal crossing guards are on the move and ready to embolden the anti-abortion movement's secret weapon, fake clinics. From the Women's Law Project, Tara Murtha is here to talk about how these sham anti-abortion centers are set to become the center of power in their fight to destroy our rights.
Plus, a power move by ass-turneys general, see how I did there? To prevent patients from banned states to travel for abortion. We break down their tactics and explain why it's probably the next SCOTUS case to watch out for.
And what is the intersection of REM's Fables of the Reconstruction and abortion access? Musician Jason Narducy explains how his REM cover band with actor Michael Shannon and their upcoming tour will support AAF and local abortion providers.
All that and more coming up on Feminist Buzzkills, the show that would like to take it outside with Nancy Mace. I'm Liz Winstead, and I'm joined by my co-host, Moji Alabodale.
Hello! She really stepped in it. And man, this has been a month of a week. Nancy Mace threatening Jasmine Crockett, Republicans wanting conditions on LA fire aid. And listen, can we talk about creepy Pete Hegseth?
I mean, really, just want to go, pliff. He is such, I mean, you know, first of all, the dude is from Minnesota, which is just like,
yikes,
buzzkill of all buzzkills. And watching these confirmation hearings, like I foolishly, Moji, felt like, oh, some of these Republicans wanted to let the world see how unqualified he was from his own mouth so that they could then in turn say, oh, I can't vote for him, right? And what I watched was a whole bunch of people ignoring his ranking competence and his horrible judgment.
My phrase of the day seems to be lick the taint. And that's how I felt watching the hearings. And I was like, oh shit, like he's deeply unqualified. He's yet another wonder of the sexual offenders that Trump is excited about. And they were very much happy to talk to him. So much congratulating him, so much thanking him for his service, which sure, I guess you were in the National Guard, but like you're a crap person who doesn't know how to do a job.
Let's say he was an impeccable soldier. Let's say he didn't have a whole bunch of drunken asshole sexual assault charges and plenty of NDAs against him. His only experience at managing people ever is 2 nonprofits that had 10 people each in their employ, and he ran both of them financially into the ground.
Yep.
And so, like, I have made some very successful things in my life.
One or two.
That doesn't mean that I know how to run a television network or a television conglomerate. I don't. It's not my job. I don't know how to do that. And so for this person who throughout the entire totality of his testifying before the senators was talking about how he was against DEI and woke culture and he doesn't want quotas or to lower standards for women or queer people or I don't know
people
who else
of color. He
yeah.
said racial minorities a lot.
Yeah. But yet we're supposed to lower the standard for him to have the job? Fuck no.
You know, the thing, Liz, and that you and I both know, and probably most of the people who are already not fully surgically attached to the taint know, is that the only reason he's up here is because he is absolutely willing to do whatever the hell the incoming president wants him to do.
It's true.
That's his only qualification.
And he said straight up when being interviewed by, I think it was Mazie Hirano, he straight up said that federal government shouldn't pay for service people if they need to travel to have an abortion, if they're stationed in a place where abortion access isn't available to them and they're on active duty. He says he just shouldn't pay for that. And, you know, he said it out loud. They'll repeal that law. They're going to go in and repeal a bunch of other stuff. He said a bunch of lies that there are quotas when they are not. You just either are in the military and you can hit their really strict, like physical fitness tests and that stuff, or you can't.
He talked about 120-pound women as though there are no 120-pound men.
I know a 120-pound man who is in the Army.
And he talked about them as though there are no men, and the problem is women who weigh 120 pounds. It was It was insulting.
It was insulting. And the last thing I'll say, and the thing that I think freaks me out the most about this is a month ago, I guess it was, when we found out about this dude and he was like, I found God and now, I'm on the up and up or whatever. I did a bunch of research and wrote a little thing on Substack about his church. And he belongs to one of those churches that are those, there's biblical roles, and women's biblical roles are to serve the husband and to have the children and to not be, in the military and not to be any part of outside society, but to simply raise a family and take care of the husband and be in the home. And he also, his church, believes that in order for Jesus to come back, that Israel needs to be within their biblical borders. So to have a Secretary of Defense who's going to pick and choose where we intervene and why we intervene, if his Lord and Savior and Bible and belief system says Israel needs to be a certain way for his 100% salvation, coupled with Mike Huckabee, who is now made the ambassador to Israel, whose church also believes that. We're talking about biblical wars and biblical reasons to intervene or not intervene in certain things. Maybe it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but those two things are real. Your eternal salvation is real.
Yeah. I think it feels right. I feel like that framing is terrifying. And also there's just enough crazy in people who are beholden to religion that I believe that this conspiracy theory has legs. Also, it's really wild to me that the Christian God is so interested in geopolitical borders.
Oh, I mean, Jesus barely had sandals. Never mind combat boots.
I wonder how God feels about Canada being our 51st state for the Gulf of America.
I don't know what the biblical borders are of North America. I never really looked into it, but I'm sure it's there. That Pete Hegseth thing really got me.
I watched it. It was on, and I found it distressing. The things that they were saying, these lies that were allowed to stand, the fact that this man is so supremely unqualified, and every single Republican senator who spoke was excited to speak to him was wild. And I was proud of our Democratic senators who did stand up to him and ask him real hard-hitting questions, but we don't have the majority.
To think that Republicans would just bow to Trump, understanding they are putting the American armed forces, of which there are 300 million people who work in the Department of Defense and a budget of $880 billion, that they would think that this halfwit would be a good steward amongst all the other people who have worked tirelessly within these systems. It's kind of shocking. It's a shocking thing. And it's our first show back.
Woo! And the year is just starting on the podcast land for us, and it's going to be a wild one.
Happy 2025.
I feel like I Will Survive might be the theme song of the year.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Or Will I Survive? It's questionable. I don't know if you can rework the song to that, but it is.
Yeah, I'm going to just hang on to my underpants and hope that we survive.
And maybe you can do that while we drop a steaming dump of this week's news. Hit it.
Now it's time for a steaming dump of this week's abortion news. Mitch McConnell's new replacement is kicking off 2025 with big kin energy. In his first order of business, Senate Majority Leader John Thune is pushing a vote on the Born Alive Act, a law created to solve a problem that doesn't exist. This red herring demands doctors must save infants if they are born alive during an abortion procedure, which isn't a thing, nor how abortions work. What's next, John? The Billionaire Harm Reduction Act? No deductible for spine reinsertion surgery? I got questions.
That sounds about right. And congratulations, Arkansas. You've been voted the best of the worst by the worst. Yes, the breeding ground of Huckabees was named the #1 pro-life state by Americans United for Life, the anti-abortion movement's gold standard in crafting misogyny-affirming legislation. But that's not Arkansas's only achievement unlocked. They're also #1 in maternal mortality. So it's official. To be the most pro-life state in 2025, you got to kill the most women.
Them's the rules. Moving on to the most pro-life in prison state, a Mississippi lawmaker has introduced a bill that would punish anyone who helps a teen get an abortion with 20 years to life. It's unclear what effect this will have if the bill passes because the direction the state is heading, well, just living there could feel like a death sentence.
And this has been your steaming news dump. Before we get to the show, we do have some things we want to get you up to speed on. If you're in Minnesota and you're going to the Capitol tomorrow, join me, March with Abortion Access Front. You can sign up, meet us, march with the coolest people ever. I'll also be speaking at the rally. And so join a bunch of badasses in the 8 below degree weather. We're going to be marching and we're going to be loving it. I'll put the link to sign up in the show notes and you will get an email letting you know where and when we will be meeting.
Also, if you have not or you want to see again the AAF documentary, No One Asked You, Jolt is still running it, and it's an excellent thing to do on Inauguration Day. You don't want to watch what's happening in the Capitol. Watch us.
It's a great documentary. It'll get you inspired to act. Watch it. Plus, there is one day left of the Biden administration's administration. That means you have one day left to pressure him to publish the ERA. You can text, you can call. There are scripts where you can talk and tell him. You can just text him information. We're going to put all of that information in our show notes. Please text, call, put the pressure on for the last minute and tell Biden to put women in the Constitution.
And the inauguration isn't the only shit show coming to DC next week. The March for Life is January 24th, bringing tens and thousands of anti-abortion grifters to march, organize, and announce their playbook for ending abortion in 2025 and beyond.
Yep, so that means next week we have a special episode bringing a play-by-play of the March for Life with insight and analysis from Dr. Michelle Goodwin and actor and activist star of The Vampire Diaries, Candace King.
It's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. It's going to be scary. It's also just going to be, that's where they do all the quiet part out loud, and it gives us an opportunity to like absorb it, analyze it, and then realize how they're going to be moving forward to try to fuck with us in 2025. Ugh.
Now let's get to the stories we want to break down further. Liz?
Yikes. There's so many kicking off the year, but I wanted to kick off our first show back to talk about the abortion shenanigans that we are sure will end up at SCOTUS this year. And the story that I think is going to be the one is Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is suing a New York doctor who used something called shield laws to send medication abortion to Texas. This case is testing shield laws, and you need to know what shield laws are and what this is. It is a shit show, Moji. So
tell us about it.
The case basically laid out in a nutshell is there's a New York doctor named Maggie Carpenter who did a telemedicine visit with someone in Texas. She sent that person some pills. Now, from the lawsuit, it says the woman asked the fetus's biological father to take her to the hospital. She was experiencing severe bleeding. There, they were informed that her hemorrhage was due to a woman being 9 weeks pregnant before losing the fetus. Now, this biological father suspected the woman had intentionally withheld information about her pregnancy and that she had possibly taken abortion medication. And when he went home, he found that she actually did some packaging or remnants or whatever. So
imagine wanting someone to carry your child, whether or not they want to. Like, imagine caring that much.
100%. So the thing that's wild is we talked about Jonathan Mitchell a lot on the show, right? Mm-hmm. He is the former Texas Solicitor General who also wrote that bounty hunting law in Texas, who is a professional, literal busybody now, who is driving around Texas trying to find aggrieved men who are mad that their partners, wives, people, anyone in their lives had an abortion without their permission.
Because that's what we need to worry about. That's absolutely what we need to worry about.
100%. So Jonathan Mitchell works with Ken Paxton a lot. And I'm not saying that he's involved, but we don't know exactly when Paxton filed this case, But we do know that back in May, Jonathan Mitchell filed 2 different cases that were both women who allegedly traveled or received abortion out of state. Both cases were filed by ex-boyfriends who say they disagreed with their former partner's decision to get an abortion. And the petitions asserted each woman's mother influenced her to have an abortion. We don't know the name of this patient in the case, but we do know that all of those things line up. So I'm not saying Jonathan Mitchell's involved. I'm just saying, how else would Ken Paxton get a case? Because he has never revealed where this case came from, right? So what are shield laws, you ask? Well, several states have these laws where doctors are protected from prescribing medication abortion to patients who live out of state. What a shield law does is protect the physician from the state will not prosecute them, and they will not honor and or coerce with any state claiming that a doctor has violated a law in a different state.
So this basically is what allows states like New York and Illinois to provide abortion medication to people in, let's say, Texas, as we will, because this is this case, and be safe and not have to like buy extra insurance or like malpractice insurance or worry about being like prosecuted criminally.
Exactly. And so, needless to say, anti-abortion people do not believe that shield laws are a thing. So what the Attorney General from Texas, Paxton, is saying is that he wants the courts to stop Dr. Carpenter from continuing to provide abortion medication to patients in Texas. And he wants to apply the penalties for the Texas ban on her, which carries a $100,000 fine for each violation. Now,
but he's asking for $250,000. So what are these other violations?
Exactly. And it's not really clear how Attorney General Paxton would seek to enforce the law against a New York doctor. And a lot of press is trying to find out. He won't answer questions. And David Cohen, who is has been a guest on this show, somebody who we love, he helped craft some of these shield laws, including the New York law. And what he said was that this suit that Ken Paxton is bringing is precisely why these shield laws were created, right? He says Texas has no jurisdiction over Dr. Carpenter. She's not physically present in Texas. The courts cannot order her to do anything in Texas. And the New York courts aren't going to order her to do anything. And they can't get the assistance of the New York courts to do anything because of the shield laws.
Right. Basically, Ken Paxton's like, I see a shield and I want to bang my head against it. And the shield law is like, okay.
And I see a shield law and I want to take this test all the way through the courts, right? And so if this, which I believe it will, end up in the federal courts, Texas is probably going to argue that shield laws can't be enforced because the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution requires states to respect other state laws.
But then why would Texas not be required to respect New York's laws? Because that's why she can do the work she does in New York.
Exactly. And legal experts who support shield laws say that the laws constitute a public policy exception to that clause. So this case, if it sounds like we're confusing you and it feels like convoluted, that's why I think it's going to the Supreme Court, because, we have to rely on facts, and public opinion in this case is going to be huge, and I feel like there's so many with these cases that we've seen, Moji, where you have so much sympathy for people with wanted pregnancies who were turned away from care and who almost died in parking lots and almost died in hospitals or were sent home. You feel this level of empathy, right? And I think that it's going to be how the court of public opinion plays into all of this is going to be really interesting.
I feel like one of the problems with relying on the court of public opinion about that is like we hear these stories again of people bleeding in parking lots, but like we don't hear the stories of people who do self-managed abortion, especially in states where it's banned, because it's unsafe. You can't go to the media and say, yes, I live in Texas and I had abortion pills mailed here and I used them and it was fine, right? And now I'm in this court case because like, someone, an ex-boyfriend or whatever that dude is, went in my trash. Like,
yeah,
it's a little wild to me that it's so much harder to garner that sympathy from people who don't really think about what this means.
And when you don't talk about the abortion procedure a lot, you're not really familiar with what the abortion procedure with pills is. And if you think about it, what you're doing is you're shedding your uterine lining and the contents of it with pills, right?
Yep.
So you're bringing on like the biggest period of your life because that's what your period is shedding that uterine lining. And so you're using a medication to help you do that. That's a lot of blood and it's a lot of cramping. And I think if people feel scared and they don't know, a lot of blood is a lot of blood and that's scary. And I think a lot of people are being criminalized because they just didn't really realize how much blood is involved really when you shed your uterine lining and when you need to have a medication abortion, right? So they go, and oftentimes, as we saw, in the news this week, that a nurse, was in coercion with that the patient in Ohio in coercion with the cop to turn in a person who was miscarrying and went to the hospital. And so if there's collusion and criminalization from hospitals, a lot of
or
people
ex-boyfriends.
But the ex-boyfriend went with her to the hospital and then they all colluded, that part makes me feel really nervous.
I want to step back into what you said before, because I also think that is maybe a hiccup that we as abortion messengers really need to take on, that we don't all know what proper bleeding looks like in a medication abortion, right? We don't all know. I've never personally, I've had a procedural abortion, but I haven't had medication abortion. And so I think if you don't know what that can look like, if you haven't, I don't know, it's hard to say, seen examples, but really been properly coached in what to expect and at what levels do you really need to be concerned? What are the actual indicators, like maybe presence of fevers when you go to a hospital when you're in Texas, right? Maybe if you're not feverish in hospital. I know I am a person who has a period. I identify as a woman. And when I moved from using using like tampons to cups, it was a whole different relationship with blood. And that's just a simple, boring monthly flow, right? And so I imagine if I was shedding products of a 6-week conception, it could be even more, and it could be daunting if you're not really clear.
Well, and when you're not really, when we just don't even talk about what abortion is, and that people are so unfamiliar, even with like gestational age and what that's all about, that you're gonna, in your period, you might clot and you have your period, but we've had periods every month, so we're familiar with periods even. But if we're not going to talk about abortion in the ways that needed to be talked about, people are going to be afraid of just the natural expulsion of what's in your uterus.
Because a regular period, that's 4 weeks at best of tissue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's about the time when people may discover they're pregnant if they are regular. So anything you get is more than that.
So that's the part that I worry about with just like the public opinion piece. But really in the like going back to the sort of legal questions that people will ask, and that I think that like we have to educate people who are pro-choice and pro-abortion about too. The questions they're going to ask is the doctor who is in New York, who has a telemedicine visit and then sends pills, performing an abortion in Texas? What constitutes practicing medicine in Texas, right? Is the patient self-managing going to be punished? Is mailing pills performing an abortion and violating Texas law? Like, these are questions that my guess is Ken Paxton's going to push and push and push until it has to end up going to the Supreme Court.
Another interesting point you brought up before, one time when we were talking, is that everybody who's done medication abortion has not done it in front of a doctor. So what makes it different if it's happening in Texas and the doctor's in New York than if you're in Texas and the doctor is in another county?
That's exactly right. 63% of all abortions that are performed now are done with pills. And so even if you have a law or a state that has a law that requires you to acquire the pills in front of the doctor or take the first pill in front of the doctor, no state law requires you to take the second pill in front of a doctor. And no state law requires, as you said, you to have your abortion in front of a doctor. So every single person who takes these pills is expelling the contents of their uterus and having their miscarriage, because that's what's happening, on their own in the comfort of how they have it. And so it's very safe. We know that. And so I feel like this is a nice dovetail into your story, but look for this story to go to the Supreme Court. We'll be out following up on it because also there's more shenanigans coming out of Texas with like trying to get the records of people who've left state lines, which is a whole nother podcast that we'll do. You know, I love our two stories today because this story is the one I believe is going to be the one that helps decide access to medication abortion.
Mhm.
And going into your story just about how the right has been trying to demonize medication abortion in this new study that just came out you're about to talk about, I think gives us a lot of ammunition to talk about how safe and effective it really is.
Yeah, and the premise of my story is essentially that mifepristone approval was not a cakewalk. And if you hear antis talk about it, they will say like, oh, they just rushed it through. But actually, the FDA approval in 2000 was long, drawn out process. They didn't cut any corners. And all of the attacks that we hear are hinged on lies, on exaggerations, on political opinions, and not actually facts or evidence of harm. And I'll reiterate, and I'll say it every single time someone asks, mifepristone and misoprostol are one of the safest and effective drugs in the US. But these attacks are not new. Like, along with the long drawn out process the FDA took, they were concerned about anti-abortion violence. And the threat of anti-abortion violence has been and continues to be very real. And the effects of those attacks and the violence colored both the approval process and, as I said before, continues to come up in conservative legal and legislative fights. So,
what are the facts, Moji?
Okay.
Tell us the facts.
So the facts are, and I'm just going to jump to the facts because a lot of what I have to say about like 65% of abortions are done with we know this, right? We all know this. But mifepristone had existed in France for 12 years before it ever came to the US.
It was
12
invented
years.
there.
It was invented there, and then it was in the market. People were using it. People were ending pregnancies with mifepristone and misoprostol for 12 years before it came to the US. But the FDA got it. And of course, they wanted to do their own trials with their own Americans. And so they were like, great, France has been doing this, but all we'll take from them is fries. And we need Americans to, like, you know, whatever, see this. So there were there weren't actually before. There have been, but there were 4 years of trials in the US and studies and talks in the FDA. The FDA is a pretty conservative organization. They continue to be, you know, to hear anybody, any conservative talk about it. They think the FDA is running willy-nilly, but essentially they're scientists, and they're scientists who don't necessarily work in abortion, right? This is, as far as I know, the only abortion medication we have. So this is the one and done of abortion for them, right?
And I love that you just kind of touched on, but I'd love for you to just talk about, like, within their process, they knew that the anti-abortion movement was going to be scrutinizing them. And also that within the ranks of the FDA, there are anti-abortion people who have to prove this medication. And so it would be my guess that they would do everything in their power to try to keep it off the market. And they simply couldn't because there was no denying the efficacy and the safety.
Exactly. Well, in terms of the so I didn't read so much about what was happening internally with the FDA, but it is and continues to be a very conservative organization. But when they were doing the trials, they felt like they had to shroud everything in secrecy, because they were afraid of attacks, things as overt as bomb threats, right? So they would hide the identity of FDA staffers working on it. They hid the identity of drug manufacturers in the US, their locations, their identities. When they had to meet in person, they would have everyone meet and then bus to a separate location. And so when we talk about anti-abortion violence, they knew at that time, and it was approved in 2000. So this is the late 90s. They knew that they had to be careful, and not careful because the medication was ineffective, careful because antis don't care about facts, right? They're fine, terrifying bureaucrats just doing their job.
It is wild to think about this because then the anti-abortion movement can spin that into your secret abortion things, and you try to keep it a secret and have no culpability in that. And it makes me mad that, like, that's a news story that should be out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear you tell everybody just how many studies there were and how many years and all the research, because it is so fascinating to me, actually, the science behind getting this drug approved.
So when they were doing approval, there were actually only 4 studies that were used. But again, I want to remind you that the drug had been on the market in France for 12 years. There were 4 studies that were used in the approval. Since the approval, there have been more than 100 studies over 30 years for mifepristone.
So the upkeep has been intense.
Upkeep is ongoing, and every single study reaffirms the safety. Every single study shows that less than 1% of patients experience serious side effects when using it. And I don't want to compare, because comparison is a thief of joy, but that's far, far fewer than the risks of penicillin or Viagra. And to give you a comparison of how much 4 years and hundreds of studies is, one of the studies that they used for mifepristone was a worldwide 20,000 women study. Viagra took 6 months and 3,000 men to pass in the FDA.
Wow. And how many UTIs in that study?
Viagra has caused so many UTIs.
So many UTIs. I want to know if they're in the serious risk of Viagra, because I feel like they're not. And I feel like I want to add every UTI,
yes,
chlamydia, all of the please stop fucking me with your 8-hour boner.
But also, even after these 4 years in studies, right, they still came out with these RIMS, right, this risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, which really said that basically it had to be guarded. This is a medication that needs to be under lock and key.
I just want to tell folks, REMS is a classification of medication. It's like one of the most protective classifications of medications that's used for highly addictive drugs, highly dilaudid and things like that. And they threw medication abortion into this risk evaluation mitigation strategy category, or REMS.
I'm excited about who wants to be addicted to medication abortion, who just wants to.
Nothing like that high of, it's the gateway drug to just wanting to shed your uterine lining 2 or 3 times a day.
And again, to point to how safe and effective medication abortion is, the RIMS has been updated several times. And every single time, the dosage is lowered. The amount of time it can be used is lowered. The doctor recommended times of seeing a person is lowered, because this medication is exceedingly safe. And the more people use it, the safer they find out it is, right? And I also want to go back to something else you brought up, Liz, which is the media, right? Unfortunately, I think that conservatives get to organize around saying oh, they did this in secret and it happened the way it did, because it's really hard to find information out about this that isn't an actual clinical trial. And listen, clinical trials, reading them is not sexy. You know what's sexy? Aaron Hawley standing up and saying something stupid, right?
Yeah.
That's the soundbite that our media is willing to hear, as opposed to looking at the scientific facts. And so it's really concerning that they get to run with these narratives because no one fact checks them.
Exactly. And something we're going to talk about with our first guest too is the anti-abortion movement's weird push on reversing medication abortion, and how they're trying to lead the charge on that garbage science as well. So they will buy garbage science with non-peer reviewed one study on reversing your abortion. But when you have 4 studies to get it approved and over 100 studies to maintain its safety and efficacy, and that's not enough for these people, it's really a mess. But I love this study, and I hope you not only listen to the podcast, but read how this actually came to be, because it's one of the fights you're going to be having constantly, and one of the fights you're going to be seeing constantly. And to be armed with information about how wonderful this drug is, I think is really important. This is a cool story. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought it was really super great. Anyway, as always, these stories will be in our show notes, and you can find the best, most up-to-the-minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding your care on our website, aafront.org. Our Charlie chatbot on the bottom right will walk anyone anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion. Yeah, I love that story, Liz. And I really think our next guest is going to take us through some important facts also about this abortion reversal you brought up, and just crazy things happening in this movement.
I think it's a perfect time for the guest too, because I like moving forward and looking at all of the tactics that we're going to be facing. And one of the tactics that we're harping on constantly, and organizations that we're harping on constantly, are fake clinics, and they're about to get more powerful.
Yep. fake abortion clinics will be the ones to watch as this new administration will be empowering them in so many ways. We wanted to have an expert on how this will play out. So joining us to go over it all is the Director of Impact and Engagement at Women's Law Project, a public interest legal center that among its work is an authority on the dirty tricks these clinics pull in Pennsylvania and beyond. Please welcome Tara Murtha. Hi, Tara.
Hey, Tara.
Hi, great to be here.
Is it?
Well, to be here with you. Not the broader here, the very specific here.
So, Tara, from our work and research, we are sure that fake clinics are going to continue to be legitimized by the anti-abortion wave that's coming in hot in 2025 and beyond. So first, let's talk about who they are and what they do and why we should be worried. So take it away.
So for people who are new to this topic, I'll just define them. We're talking about, sometimes they're called crisis pregnancy centers. That's what they historically called themselves. Sometimes they're called anti-abortion centers, fake clinics, unregulated pregnancy centers, because they are typically unregulated. And these are anti-abortion organizations that have been around since the late 60s. They've shape-shifted. That is their business model, to shape-shift. They are a key arm in the anti-abortion movement. For a long time, they had successfully sort of hoodwinked everyone into believing that they were these like scattershot, mom and pop, community supported organizations, but they're actually a, critical arm of the anti-abortion movement. They are the anti-abortion movement. They're not separate from it. They have very specific functions, and they're all over the country. As an average before Dobbs, there's not an accurate ratio yet since Dobbs, but at that point, on average, there were 3 times as many of these, unregulated pregnancy centers than legitimate medical providers providing medical care. And that really varied widely by states, depending on, of course, if they were funneled millions and bajillions of dollars to expand in that state. So that can swing as high as a ratio as high as 11-1. So it's sort of this shadowed anti-abortion dragnet where they increasingly pretend to be medical providers because it's an interference model. They seek to interfere with people who are seeking legitimate medical care. And they do that physically on the sidewalk by standing outside, by parking vans, and they do that digitally online by embedding the word abortion a million times in their back end of their website so that it pops up higher than a legitimate provider providing abortion care, so that a person could be deterred and hopefully delayed and perhaps even deceived out of accessing their contraception and abortion care.
And I just want to add too that if you've ever been driving down the highway and you see a big billboard that says, pregnant, need help, we're here. They don't advertise to say, we're not for abortion. They often are open next to or across the street from or in very close proximity to actually abortion providers. Usually sometimes they have the same sounding name, like Women's Health Clinic versus if the real clinic's called, the Health Clinic for Women. They were born, I believe, out of the Catholic Church and then have expanded to all the denominations are getting a piece of this action profoundly. We know that the Knights of Columbus pay millions and millions of dollars to help them get ultrasound machines. They're well funded and they're designed to talk you out of getting your abortion.
I know, Liz, you said all denominations, but I also want to reiterate, these are Christian based. These are not Jewish based. These are not Hindu based. Correct. They're all the denominations of Christianity out here spreading this misinformation with a side of God.
With a side of Jesus.
Yeah, you're right. The deception is baked in. They co-locate next to legitimate providers. They adapt their logos and names to sometimes be similar to the one next door, the legitimate provider next door. And they shapeshift. On average, like 37% change names within, a year. They often, you'll see one name on their 990s and another name on the door. So they operate within a gray zone, like a regulatory gray zone, and operate sort of in this space, the shape-shifting space on purpose.
And I think before we get to like these buckets of how they're going to be even more emboldened by this new administration, I want to just give a couple of more details about them that I think are important to really before we dive into the conversation. And one is that if you were hoodwinked into going to one of these places, you're assuming you're going into a facility that provides healthcare. A lot of times people end up giving them lots and lots of personal information. And
Mhm.
because they are not an actual healthcare facility that is registered by the state or the federal government, the information you give them is not protected.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. So they talk about, they use the word medicalizing. And so years ago, starting in the 90s, well, earlier than that, really the 80s, but they decided to start medicalizing as a marketing strategy to get pregnant people in through the door. They've only doubled down on the medicalizing claims. They use the presence of an ultrasound machine in the facility as to then say, now we're, abracadabra, a medical provider. Well, you can get a scan at the mall, to get a sonogram and a Christmas ornament. The mall's not suddenly a hospital, right? So, uh, so they use this sort of medical cosplay. Their websites, which all look alike because they're all from the anti-abortion steering organization that provides them little kits, typically feature pictures of friendly, youthful female doctors smiling with stethoscopes around their necks, and use words like HIPAA, which is an actual federal law that means an actual thing. There are, the one federal medical privacy law that we really have in the United States. And yet, despite all that cosplay and sort of medical office on Halloween, they are not actually governed like medical providers are. And so they don't have to comply with the health, safety, or privacy standards that medical providers do.
And they are often run by volunteers who are given scripts because they don't provide actual medical care. They may have a doctor on their board who's like a Christian doctor, but oftentimes they are not. Anybody can run an ultrasound machine, people. If you didn't know that, anybody can run an ultrasound machine. It's not a thing that like a medical person does. And you could put a sign outside your house that said, free pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, whatever you want to get them at the dollar store. And it sounds medically.
Well, that's the whole thing with being medically, right? And even the pregnancy tests, they actually got in trouble. A chain of CPCs got in trouble in the 80s for practicing medicine without a license when they did, real deal pregnancy tests. Now they use the over the counter sticks that you can get for about 35 cents on Amazon if you buy them in bulk. And very strategically, speaking to those regulatory gray zones, the advice is you give the person the stick and they pee on it in your bathroom, but they're diagnosing themselves in front of you. You're not technically diagnosing them at that point. So all the cosplay of pregnancy confirmation, even though it actually undermines public health because it serves to sever pregnancy confirmation from the care one might need in the wake of being diagnosed with pregnancy, all of that is a pretext to buy time with the person to try to dissuade them and persuade them to carry the pregnancy. So, well, I've seen manuals that say, take 30 minutes for the pregnancy test. It's the same test that we've all smoked the cigarette for in college while your friend was waiting for the test, right? It's one cigarette long is how it takes. We all know this. but they say 30 minutes because that's more time built in. They're manufacturing a window of opportunity to strong arm you into behaving the way that they are devoting their lives to forcing strangers to behave.
And also, I just want to say, too, these places are not, it's not like they're anti-abortion, but they're going to do everything in their power to try to prevent pregnancy. They don't believe in birth control. They don't believe in premarital sex. They don't believe in sex outside of the marriage at all. They promote this quack medical thing called abortion reversal. And they are sort of the leading hub of talking about, well, we can reverse your abortion. And if you've never heard of that and you're like, shut the fuck up. Tara, will you explain what abortion reversal is and why these fake clinics are sort of the leading promoters of it?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the functions that the CPC industry, because it is a industry, which I'm sure we'll get to, that rakes in a lot of money. But one of their main goals is to manufacture the concept of abortion regret. All the scientific studies show, all the analysis for decades and decades of abortion access show that there's no such thing as post-abortion syndrome and these things they make up, right? So their approach is to manufacture, say, well, we have anecdotal evidence. I spoke to a person who came in here. So abortion pill reversal is an extension of that, but goes even further. Instead of just posting and spreading medical misinformation, this actually is a practice that goes beyond just bad information, and it's a made up intervention that sounds medically but is not, wherein they tell you that if you took the first of the two medicines that you typically take in a medication abortion regimen, that if you took the first and not the second, they tell you, call now, report that you started an abortion, and we will refer you and get you it's progesterone. They distribute progesterone to the person and will, quote, reverse your abortion. For anybody who this is new to, no, you cannot reverse an abortion. It sounds made up because it is. The medical reality is that medication abortion is commonly a 2-medication protocol. And if you don't take the medication, the pregnancy may not be terminated. And so instead of telling people that, and there's a pretty wide swing of what percentage of pregnancies that might happen with. By the way, it's not FDA approved to take the first without the second. So you should be looking at, receiving medical care. But instead of just telling a person that, they say, we have this magical snake oil intervention. So you need to call now and report the abortion you began to the anti-abortion industry. And in exchange for that information, we will give you a snake oil treatment that is not only not proven to stop an abortion in progress or anything like that, it's not proven safe. There was one legitimate study that attempted to analyze and see if it was safe or effective, since it was already happening without any proof of that. And that study had to be stopped because of how dangerous it was and how many participants were hemorrhaging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wild. And so now that we've sort of given this rounded out description of how they operate, why they operate, and the tactics they have, I think this is the perfect time to sort of break into the buckets of how important they are to the anti-abortion movement and how the anti-abortion movement is chomping at the bit to expand their power and their legitimacy. And so I want to talk a little bit about how after when Dobbs happened, that growth really started with the states starting to, have their laws go on the books immediately to end abortion in all the states. And with the lack of clinics, the growth of them and the funding for them on a statewide level started. So do you want to talk a little bit about how that growth movement happened post Dobbs? And then let's get into federally and what they plan on doing as far as funding when this new administration takes over.
So the CPC industry has been seeking to gobble up public funds in any way possible for a while now, right? So we had many states that already had, I'm here in Pennsylvania is where I work, and we were the first state to divert public funding to the CPC industry. And then on top of that, we double funded them by taking TANF, the one program that is a cash assistance program for people in crisis. Pennsylvania took money from that, from the families who qualified for it, and funneled that to anti-abortion executives that were making, $300,000+ a year to set up a little obstacle course for the very people that they purport to care so much about, and that they took that money from, right? So it's not a new phenomenon of CPCs getting public funds, but since Dobbs, that funding has skyrocketed. So at least 22 states, I believe, now receive some kind of direct funding. There are already some federal funds going to CPCs. But frankly, since Dobbs, what's been happening is that our injuries and deaths are a fundraising tool. Right. Like I said, the CPC industry is one arm of the anti-abortion movement. Another arm is the legal lawmaker arm, which are passing, bans, forcing people into pregnancy, which is a deprivation of our human rights. And then so with one hand, they're forcing us into this situation. And then with the other hand, they're saying, but we have a pack of diapers for you if you complete this obstacle course. We're totally helping you out. So they're pitching themselves as a way to help the very people that they harmed with the other hand. If I punched you in the face with my left arm and then gave you a piece of ice with my right and said, aren't I so great? I am helping you. You were injured and I was right here for you. And I knew exactly where you were.
And the reminder is by depleting TANF and other programs that help low-income families, and then forcing people to have children, pretending you're going to help them, the programs that would help people are dried up.
Yep.
And we're not talking about $100,000. We're talking of tens of millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the anti-abortion movement strategically siphons what parts of the safety net they don't successfully sever because their business model relies on economic scarcity. So does some of their gray zone. They're staying in the gray zone of regulation also, depends on economic scarcity because they offer their services, you get the 35-cent pregnancy test for free. Right. So that helps them evade what would be when consumer protection laws might apply, because typically consumer protection laws require a transaction, a financial transaction. So we're talking about a lot of money here. In 2022, the CPC industry took in $1.7 billion.
That's not tens of millions of dollars.
Oh my God. Oh my God. That even just freaked me out. Holy shit.
Like $1 billion more dollars.
Yeah, Reproductive Health and Freedom Watch has been doing great work with fiscal analysis, and they found that in 2022, the CPC industry raked in $1.7 billion. And now we know that all of this public funding, that's, by the way, the most of that is private funds.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I was like, are they getting that much from the government? Okay, so this is from individuals and taxpayers.
So we're taking TANF money from that low-income pregnant person who is trying to carry their pregnancy to term and wants to be a parent and might need temporary assistance, and funneling it to the anti-abortion activist who is already part of a $1.7 billion industry. So the majority of that, about 87%, is from private funds, private foundations. You will be shocked to discover that the biggest foundation funding the CPC industry simultaneously funds the Federalist Society, Susan B. Anthony List, Alliance Defending Freedom, and so on.
This is a family tree, basically, you're describing.
Follow the money,
Yes.
The anti-abortion industry is constructed with money. And when you look at that money, you see, now it's not, the rest of that funding isn't going to medical providers. It's going to the people creating the laws that funnel the money to the CPC industry. So it's a $1.7 billion industry in 2022. And yet, according to their own reports, they estimate that they provided, the same year that they took in $1.7 billion, about $370 million in values of services. Now, that's already an inflated number because I've seen the contracts when they were here in Pennsylvania. And for example, they charge $9 per pregnancy test, even though we know it's cheaper. They value their counseling in Pennsylvania, at least. I'm sure it's similar in other states, at triple the amount, like a comparable counseling would be. So that's already inflated value, right? So even giving it to them, even giving them their $9 pregnancy test, they value their services at $370 million. Well, what did they do with the rest? That is the $1.33 billion question. And
nobody wants to answer,
nobody wants to answer.
Think even our side, and certainly the anti-abortion Christian movement, has their head in the sand about the services they provide. They have fooled even people on our side, being like, why not give to these alternative places?
Well, and they obstruct efforts to find out how that money is being spent. I mean, speaking of, in Texas, there was a report that you had to sign an NDA to see the subcontracts from the CPC industry in Texas.
I'm sorry, the state had to sign an NDA to see the subcontracts for the money they were giving them?
A person would have to sign an NDA because it was a lawmaker called it a secret how they were spending that money. And I guess it is a secret because Texas has the highest number of CPCs and also some of the highest maternal mortality and so on. So I get back to our injuries and deaths are a fundraising tool.
That's right.
In fact, now we're seeing in state efforts to procure funnel more money to the CPC industry, they're actually sort of using the terminology of maternal mortality in it, saying right in the legislation or right in the floor debates, to claiming that by funding CPCs, you're reducing maternal mortality.
I want to just also say that you stated early on, and we know this to be true, they're mostly volunteers. So even this counseling that they're valuing at 3 times the cost of counseling, we're not talking about licensed counselors. We're not talking about social workers. We're talking about religious people who want to volunteer their time to an organization. We're not talking about actual work being done by people who do this work.
No external credentialing or oversight. This is lay person counseling. And if you wanted to compare it to credentialed sort of evidence-based peer-to-peer counseling that goes on at like rape crisis centers or DV, that type of thing. Again, what I've seen of some of the estimates, about triple, paying themselves about triple what, any other arguably equivalent counseling would be.
And I think it's important to remember that as we look at what we know the plans are going to be, especially how they can move through the Department of Health and Human Services, that when we cut Title X funding, when we stop the global, when we can no longer globally talk about abortion in these other places, that funding, that Title X funding will go to these fake clinics.
I expect that will be true. On a federal level, with the incoming administration, people, close watchers of the CBC industry expect definitely existing streams of funding intended to support actual medical care will be diverted to CPCs, to unregulated pregnancy centers. Certainly expect to see that from Title X. I also wouldn't be shocked to see that from the teen pregnancy prevention program, from the abstinence program that they use some other acronym for, if not setting up, a direct stream of funding. The Biden administration made efforts to tighten up TANF because a decreasing percentage of families that qualify for TANF actually obtain the funds. In Texas, it's something very, very low. Less than 10%, I think, of the people that qualify actually obtain it, while it gets given to anti-abortion activists. And anti-abortion lawmakers in Congress sought to block an effort to analyze and improve, that make sure that TANF is going toward what it was intended to go toward. Yeah. So I definitely think that we're going to see existing streams. Also, it's a little bit more hidden from the public when you just divert or exchange the rules for who qualifies for existing streams of funding. Another thing that we're going to see increasingly is these like wacky tax incentive structures to fund the CPC industry. We're seeing that in a lot of states. And one of the perceived benefits is even less oversight, as opposed to a state contract that's literally laid out. They use the terminology, no strings attached, AKA oversight and regulation as for public money being spent.
Let's get to the data. When a person decides to go to a fake clinic and they end up turning over their data because they think they're in a place that has some HIPAA protections, people give them so much. You give what you would give a normal doctor. What's going on with that? Who does that affect? What are the dangers in that for a standard consumer or potential, I don't want to say patient, because that would mean they were having real medical care. But what is the danger here, both broadly and individually?
Okay. So we know the anti-abortion movement wants our private health data, right? That's been going on for quite some time. And unregulated pregnancy centers is a way to collect that data. We talked about the way that they're medicalized and appear to be doctors' offices, but are not. And even some of them use the terminology of HIPAA on their homepages. So what are people used to when they interact with a medical provider, with your doctor, like intake type questions, right? So they ask a scope of questions. And I want to be clear too, that we're not just talking about people who physically go into a CPC. There's actually not much evidence that all that many people go physically into CPCs. Increasingly, we need to think of the CPC industry as a digital infrastructure with some brick and mortar outposts, right? Because what they're doing is now they have two main targets. They're always trying to shake off the low income parents coming in that need diapers and onesies and things like that. That was part of what galvanized the medicalization movement. CPC administrators thought all of these, people who needed diapers and onesies had an entitlement mentality, and they used terminology like giving a hand up and not a handout, that type of thing. But again, another benefit for them of medicalizing is that people give information about a full scope of their behaviors, relationship history, drug history, pregnancy history, all of these things. But we need to remember that they're fundamentally targeting now pregnant people and children. Teenagers is their second big target. They openly talk about this. Websites, when you read, if you bother trying to comb through the sometimes 4,000 word plus gibberish privacy policies on CPC websites, they'll say, we don't knowingly collect information on people younger than 13 years old. So what is that? They're knowingly collecting this information from 13-year-olds. We're talking about 13, 14, 15-year-old kids on their phone in their bedroom who are trying to find out information about sexual health, pregnancy in a country without standardized evidence-based age-appropriate sex ed. So we deprive them of that information. And then when they go out looking for it on their own, we allow this scheme that pops up. You're on this website, chatbot pops up, says, do you have any questions? And there you go. Now you have your 13-year-old in their bedroom putting in their personal information to a chatbot, which they're used to communicating that way and perceive it to be a medical provider, perhaps. And, in this environment, that type of information is a time-shifted risk. Laws change state to state. Things are happening quickly. So unfortunately, many people don't even know that they gave their information away and that it's stored who knows where for who knows how long and shared with who knows. But we do know that Heartbeat International, the biggest organization that steers the CPC industry, isn't particularly careful about the data that they collect. This summer, there was a big data breach where it was found that they had posted a training video out to the open internet, to YouTube, that they were using it to train CPC administrators on their software with real client information. A map popped up of home addresses, ultrasound information. Jessica Valente did a expose on that if anybody wants to check that out. So we certainly know from that it's not encrypted even. So, Senator Warren's made efforts to try to find out, just what are the data collection practices. But there has been huge resistance and obstruction to any inquiries as to what information's been collected, where is it stored, for how long, and for what purpose.
And I also think it's just reminding people that in states where abortion is illegal and where they have these horrible penalties for it, these fake clinics are very happy to turn over. You go in there, you get a positive pregnancy test, they have your information. All of a sudden, you're walking around 3 months later and you're not pregnant anymore. Who's to say that they're not taking your data and fully plan on turning it over to law enforcement to criminalize people who are here? Let's be clear that these people are in league with the butcher, if you will.
Well, I mean, Dr. Grace Howard found evidence of a CPC sharing information from a client's visit with law enforcement to support a pregnancy prosecution. This person wasn't even considering abortion, apparently. They went in and got the ultrasound, perhaps under the mistaken impression that that was medical care in some way, which I've definitely spoken with people who that's happened to as well. They perceived the ultrasound as prenatal care when it is not. And it was used to prosecute that person for, alleged drug use while pregnant. So we certainly don't know the scope of CPCs handing off information to law enforcement.
Tara, what's the good news?
Please give us some good news.
Oh my God, I wasn't told I'd be asked for good news. No, the good news is that more people, I think, are becoming aware of what unregulated pregnancy centers are and what they're doing. And they touch so many corners of just what's going on in general. I think that what really needs to happen is, look, Americans want privacy in general. Americans want digital privacy in general. There are attempts to do that, consumer privacy. So the privacy tech people at this point, I think, are connected with the reproductive rights people to understand, the infrastructure of the anti-abortion movement. I think that all of these kind of violations of our trust that are happening, it can't be left exclusively on reproductive rights advocates to try to rein in, this industry from invading nearly every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, it's true. And if you didn't know, Abortion Access Front has this incredible program called Expose Fake Clinics. And if you're like, what can I do? The one thing we can do is make sure that we elevate who they are and let people know that if they're doing a search, that if one of these centers pops up, we have a great program where you can write in the comments that they don't provide abortion care and that they are an anti-abortion pregnancy center. And that helps somebody who is looking know that if indeed they are seeking out abortion care, they can go there. So if you want to go to exposefakeclinics.com, you can just sit there, watch Netflix, be just looking at these centers and writing this place does not provide or refer to abortion, and help expose who they are when they are so nefarious. Tara, Murtha, tell folks where they can find you.
You can find us at womenslawproject.org. And again, we're a state-based public interest legal center based here in Pennsylvania, representing both abortion providers and people seeking abortion care and working to hold the CPC industry accountable for how they target, treat, and track pregnant people and teenagers.
Thank you so much for giving us the lowdown on the
all.
past, present, and future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tara. To support Tara and the Women's Law Project, sign up for the Women's Law Project emails and action alerts at womenslawproject.org/action alerts. Link is in our show notes. And now, the party game that's faster than Monopoly, more fun than Taboo. It's 6 Degrees of Abortion. This is when Moji takes a story from the news, and I have 6 chances to link it to abortion. Let's see if she can stump me this week on our first show back. Moji, what's
All
happening?
right. This one is really fun for me. So Coors Light, they are temporarily changing their name in advance of the Super Bowl, and they are calling themselves Monday Lights because Monday is the worst day of the week, according to them. And so Monday after Super Bowl Sunday is apparently the worst Monday of the year. I firmly disagree. The worst Monday of 2025 is absolutely going to be January 20th. But I would like you to, in 6 guesses or less, link Coors Light to abortion.
Well, Moji, this is easier than you think. The Adolph Coors Corporation, that's right, Adolph Coors Corporation, historically were some of the major funders of the anti-LGBTQ community, anti-abortion community in Colorado, including Focus on the Family, including Ted Haggard. And so if you were to buy Coors, you were directly supporting anti-abortion causes for years. I don't know if they ever changed their ways, but I know that back in the day as a young activist, we boycotted the fuck out of Coors. So Coors directly funds anti-abortion activities in one for the win.
Also, I thought that was really stupid. I'm like, Monday's light? That's weird. And you
That
have to
doesn't
take a
even make
picture.
sense.
Doesn't even make sense. They did a full rebrand, including a new case container and labels. It's weird.
Good job, dude.
Good job, Liz. I think I knew that. I feel like growing up, my mom was like, Coors is racist, but I'm like, well, corporations are racist, but maybe she knew about them in particular.
Yeah, they had a lot going on, like really bad shit. They were racist, homophobic, anti-abortion. When you're Adolph Coors, things aren't going well.
It's in the name.
It's just right there. It's like saying the quiet part out, naming the quiet part.
Naming the quiet part. Well, good job, Liz. And it's a new year. And that means beyond Coors Light, we have new, exciting fake sponsors for the pod. Liz, will you tell us about the fine company supporting this week's episode?
That's right. I will. Has your home, workplace, or church been overcome with the stench of transphobic rhetoric? Have you tried everything you can to get rid of it to no avail? Well, there's a new product to end it once and for all, Nancy Mace Mace. Yep, Nancy Mace Mace is the all-in-one body spray that shuts down wafting transphobia wherever it's emanated.
Here's how it works. When you know a politician, a podcaster, or a rapey cabinet nominee is about to go off on a transphobic rant, one spritz of Nancy Mace Mace will not only silence the steaming hot take, it neutralizes the toxicity, then replaces it with a hint of jasmine.
Jasmine. Nancy Mace Mace, because eliminating the stench of a grifter isn't a job for soap and water alone.
Liz, we have so much better sponsors in 2025.
I feel very positive about Nancy Mace Mace. I wonder where we get it.
Target?
I love the idea. It's very fun.
It's not on Amazon, I'll tell you
Nancy
that.
Mace Mace. So good. Oh my God.
Let's get to our next guest. I'm really excited to talk to him.
And I'm excited to talk to him too. I am very excited. Fresh off performing on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, musician Jason Narducy is here to talk about his upcoming tour with actor and singer Michael Shannon, where they'll be covering REM's iconic 1995 album, Fables of the Reconstruction. So, how does that tie into abortion activism? Oh, baby, it does. And we're going to get into it. So please welcome one of our favorite white guys on the planet, the fantastic Jason Narducy. Hi, Jace.
Hale, slightly bow-legged, mediocre guitarist, white guy.
You forgot AAF Fave in there.
Oh, thank you. We love working with you guys.
So we love you. And you and I have known each other for a hot minute. For those of our fan base who don't know you, I love your career and I wish you could give us, I know it's like a long question to ask, but I want you to like fill folks in on what your career looks like, especially since you started as an adorable baby musician.
Okay. Yeah, I got my first electric guitar when I was 10 and immediately started a punk rock band here in Evanston, Illinois called Verboten. Yeah, baby. With the umlaut over the O with my friends. We were ages 11 to 15 and we tried to play punk rock. We made some TV appearances and played it at punk rock venues. And the story kind of became a bigger thing when our lead singer, Tracy, her cousin is Dave Grohl, and Dave Grohl made a show called Sonic Highways on HBO. And he interviewed me and Tracy and put up video of us playing at Cubby Bear in Chicago when I was 11. And he wrote a book called Storyteller, and that has a chapter about our band. So I started young, and then now I'm more known as the bass player in the Bob Mould Band and in Superchunk. I play guitar in a band called Sunny Day Real Estate from Seattle. And I have my own projects, Verboten still, and Split Single. And now, lately for the last 11 years or so, Michael Shannon and I have been getting together to play. It's kind of like a pop-up project where we pick a record. I put together a band. We learn the entire record. We practice one time the night before the show, and then we do the show. We've done like Neil Young Zuma and the Modern Lovers first record. Been doing that for 11 years, but last year we did an REM record, and it just kind of took on a life of its own where other cities wanted us to come. We came to Minneapolis and got to see you and played at First Avenue, and now we're doing another tour, and we kind of giggle about it because it's such a weird idea, but people want to see it, and we're having such fun doing it. And yeah, we were on the Tonight Show. It's absurd, but we're having fun.
It's really so fun to see because it's like you guys start with the album and then you keep going.
We sure do. I hope that was okay. That New York show was pretty long.
It's so good.
You can't just like casually drop 11 years ago, Michael Shannon and I just like started fucking around and covering Zuma and all these records. So how does one just casually start hanging out with Michael Shannon and then start making records?
Well, there's this amazing musician from Chicago named Robbie Fulks, Fulks. He's mainly known as a folk and bluegrass artist, phenomenal talent, incredible guitar player, great songwriter, great singer. He used to do these Monday night, I guess it's called a residency, every Monday night at the Hideout in Chicago. He would play, and every single Monday would be a different concept. Like he would do all Michael Jackson songs, and he would do just songs written in Kentucky. And then every Monday was a completely different show. And it was his idea to do Lou Reed Blue Mask. What a weird record. It's such a weird record. And he asked me to play bass and Michael Shannon to sing it. And that's how we met. And then Robbie moved to LA, and Michael reached out to me. He's like, "You want to keep doing this?" And yeah. So we did like the Smiths' Queen is Dead. We did a show of just songs from the first 3 Cars records. That was right after Rick Ocasek passed away. It's been all over the place, but REM was so special because of those 4 unique people coming together. And believe me, many people tried to replicate that, and they couldn't do it.
Right.
And I don't mean just cover bands. I mean like bands that were very influenced by them and wanted to sound like them. So I'm glad you feel that way. That's how we approach it. We really study. We spend a lot of time talking about the arrangements and the different parts. But what we end up with is just our version of it. And maybe you guys felt this at the shows last year, but to me, it feels like the band members are on stage celebrating the music just as much as the audience is. So it feels like we're together in our celebration of it. And we try to pick really interesting selections. It's not just the obvious hits.
No, in Brooklyn, the audience was electric, like everyone. And it was a broader age range than I expected. There were definitely some younger people, and then obviously a lot of older people, and everyone was just vibing. It was really, really beautiful to see.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, I noticed that too. It was interesting. There's a wider demographic than I expected, but love to see. This band is just so special. The music is just
and
so
I have
special.
to say that it's so fun in a world where, people can be so jaded, and are you supposed to be jaded on stage? To be able to see you as a fan of this music, and I am a massive REM fan, and I was just like, I was a kid, I was dancing, singing every word, and watching the people on stage geek out the way I was, I felt like it was a connection that I haven't experienced very much in seeing music, where and I think that is what's so much fun about the show. And then doing Fables now, come on, it's like very cool.
Well, everybody in the band has our own thing, you know. John Stewart is in Wilco, and Doug Julin has his bands, and John Worster and I are in the Bob Mould band, and John's in the Mountain Goats. Michael's got his acting. So we all have our own busyness, but we just kind of come together for this one thing to celebrate it. And that First Avenue show, that really, there is some, but I just saw this recently. I don't know if you guys have this, but I'm Facebook friends with people that I don't know. I don't know how that happened, but
Yes.
yeah. So there's this guy who was listing his favorite shows, and he's from Minneapolis, and I can't remember his name, but he listed our show as one of his favorite shows, and he described the show with 2 words: confusingly great.
That feels like high praise.
Yeah.
I agree, though. It's
Yeah.
just like, it's this weird idea that worked. I mean,
Yeah.
it was not planned out, you know.
And I have to say, so at the Minneapolis show last year, I invited all of you to dinner, and you'll come over to my house again. And you were all new on the tour, and all of a sudden we're all sitting around, and I just asked a stupid icebreaker question, and it was really fun because y'all hadn't had a chance to really sit down and talk with each other. And so it was really fun to be part of something where I was learning about you and you were all learning about each other. That was an awesome experience.
We all still talk about that night, and we're very excited to see you again in March.
And eat some more food, which is really excellent. And you're going to
Slightly
actually
bigger crew. I'll
That's
warn
fine.
you.
No.
Well, you
look,
have a slightly bigger tour. It's so much bigger
Yeah.
this time.
Yeah. And you also might see me in a couple of dates before that too, as we figure out where we're doing it. I might be tabling at some of the events and things like that ahead of Minneapolis too. So I'm not
Wonderful.
going to say. So as you're like, okay, you guys are waxing on and on about how this show sounds cool, you can't wait to get tickets. Oh, but wait, there's more. So the wild thing about this tour is when Jason decided to do it, Jason reached out to me. And this is like any white guy that's listening right now, I need you to take out a pen and a paper because this is totally how it's done. Jason reaches out and says, hey, we're doing this tour and we have this super dope poster. And what we want to do is give proceeds of the poster to Abortion Access Front. Would you be cool with that? First of all, A, made a plan. B, called me and asked me about it. C, didn't ask me to do anything. And I was like, oh my God, yes. I was so honored that you thought of us. And, you and I met when Bob Mould was producing your first record. I think it was that long ago that we met.
It was the first season of The Daily Show.
Yes.
You brought
yes.
us backstage, and yeah.
Yeah, and Bob did the theme song for The Daily Show for us and stuff. He's an old friend of mine from Minneapolis. And I'm always curious because, Jason, it is an anomaly that men will make an assessment of a landscape and say, I want to prioritize what's happening to women and people with potential for pregnancy because it matters. And I want to prioritize their humanity. And you made that decision. And so I always have to ask a guy, how is it that of all the things that you could be supporting, you landed on reproductive access?
I think part of it is, I don't know if you guys experience this, but on social media, we have friends and people that have projects, and you see it go by and you go, I want to help with that. And then you get distracted by something because this was such a unique tour and we didn't really know how it would go. When it was pretty close to us leaving for the tour, there was only 1 show that was sold out. And fortunately, 6 more did. So it ended up being successful. But we just felt like maybe we're being a little bit selfish by doing a tour like this. But I mean, by no means is it like a money-making thing, but like we're fulfilling our dreams. How can we do something that is relevant to the times? And so honestly, just seeing your awesome posts about the work that you had been doing, I reached out to Michael about it, and he stressed that this is really important to him too. And then I reached out to the band. I was like, we want to do this, but I want everybody on stage to be on board. And then I asked our wonderful tour manager, Doug, to hire merchandise sellers that only support what we're doing,
Oh, wow.
preferably women who support what we're doing, because I don't want anybody there grumpy.
No.
And that was something I'd never thought I'd lay out. But I think just being buddies with you and appreciating the work you've done and feeling like the current Supreme Court scares the shit out of me. And I just feel like the leak happened, and then Bobcat and I did that show.
Yes.
We did the show for Roe. We raised some money for that. I just wanted to keep doing things in that vein. And then I'm very happy with how popular those posters were, because we were able to contribute some.
It was really great. And I have to say, after that first tour and between the second tour, you and I had dinner and you're like, we're going to do it again. Do you want to participate? And I said, yeah. And then you upped the ante. This is why I love you so much. You're just a good friend and always thinking. And you were like, I want to help people locally in the towns we're in. So the cool part about this tour is not only is this show fantastic, but Abortion Access Front is going to be joining a local abortion rights clinic on the ground, so that the audiences before the show and after the show can buy another poster, but also learn and sign up how that they can help in their community, so that you're actually leaving behind activists in each town, Jason. And that's going to be so cool. And
I mean, even if we only get 5 to 10 a night, I feel like that's adding to the team and the
that could be monumental for a clinic.
It's monumental for a clinic, and the clinics are so excited. And then what's going to be really cool, Jace, is you're going to be able to say, please go buy a poster. The proceeds are going to go fix the fence at this clinic, or help take the staff out for whatever, or paint their whatever, so that people are going to know exactly what they're donating for. And that makes me feel really excited too.
That's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love a combo where it just like it all comes together so quickly. How many shows on the tour this time?
20
shows, and you're kicking it off Valentine's Day in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Palm Desert, and then a bunch of West Coast, and then we're in the Midwest and the East Coast.
You, Michael, and your fantastic band will be kicking off the tour February 14th in the LA area, and we will have a table at the show. So please, everyone, come meet us and your local abortion provider and get a poster to support our work. Tickets will be in our show notes.
Awesome. Jason, thank you for being awesome. I'm so excited that this tour, I think, is going to be epic. Everyone's talking about it.
Oh, good.
I love that you love doing it, and I love that you are a great human. So thanks, y'all. And I can't wait to see you out on the road.
Great to see you guys.
So great to see you. Thank you, Jason.
Hey, Jason, before we let you go, where can people find you?
Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, Jason Narducy, Narducy.
Awesome. And we'll put that in our show notes as well. Who's better than you? 0 people.
Aw, love you, Liz.
Love you. Okay, guys, you know the drill. Go out and buy tickets to the tour at concertedefforts.com, and then buy a tour poster at the show to help support our work. Plus, you can follow Jason on social at Jason Narducy. Links in our show notes.
Liz, that's our show. Thanks for listening. And thanks again to Tara Murtha. And be sure to sign up for the Women's Law Project emails and action alerts.
And thank you, Jason Narducy. And one big question. Did we make you smarter today? Did we make you laugh? If we did, show us some love by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Plus, stay connected with us every day on social media at Abortion Front across all platforms.
With your help, we can get more people to learn about this assault on abortion access. In fact, looking for where you might fit in to do some abortion activism? We got a 5-part activist training series, Operation Save Abortion, at operationsaveabortion.com.
And while you're there, you can visit our super cool activist calendar, which is chock full of local and national actions and educational opportunities. This week's featured action is for folks in Atlanta on Wednesday, January 22nd from 6:30 to 9:30. The Feminist Women's Health Center is hosting the Women's Thankathon. Come join for movies, hot chocolate, and mailing thank you notes to clinics. Indie clinics can use your support now more than ever. Link will be found in the activist calendar.
And if you want to help out with a specific clinic need, this week's Adopt a Clinic spotlight goes to our friends at Eureka, California, at Choices Rising Clinic. They're looking for everything from Post-its to pills to teas. All of these items can help make it easier for both patients and providers, and your support makes it possible. For the details on how to fulfill this wish list, head to aafront.org/resources and click Adopt a Clinic.
And a reminder, next week's show is a play-by-play of the March for Life, aka Unbornaroo, with actor and activist Candace King from the Vampire Diaries, who joins us to talk about living in the force-birthed hellhole of Tennessee. And FBK Stan, Dr. Michelle Goodwin, helps us navigate what we learned from their march and how it will frame their shenanigans in 2025 and beyond.
Also, join our Patreon. You'll support great content and get cool FBK merch and experiences. All pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front. Pledge at patreon.com/feminist buzzkills. FBK is edited by Remy DeTournay and is produced by Abortion Access Front.
Finally, we leave you with Christian nationalist Rick Green, a man who not only is showing his whole ass, he also puts the ass in masculine.
I think a lot of this has to do with Zuckerberg. I mean, some people aren't going to like the way I say this, becoming more masculine. I mean, I literally believe something has changed with that guy from a testosterone level when he started getting in to jujitsu and hand-to-hand combat, and he became more masculine, and I think became more willing to be pro-American and actually stand up for some of those things. So I know some people may discount that. I think if you talk to a guy like Rogan that has talked to him multiple times, she'd probably tell you the same thing.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.